This is actually very nerve-wracking because I spent like 2 months deciding whether or not I want to do this, and then I actually saw Jason's Card Zones illustrator in a tag 10. I was like, it's so beautiful, and I was like, I'm just gonna take the leap of faith and do it because it's not as easy as people think. It's like, oh, you can just cross it and it doesn't get a 10, you just get it back. It doesn't work like that for tag because
Hi, welcome back to PokeSNP Podcast Episode 5. Jesse and I have a special episode lined up for you guys today. This episode will be packed with latest auction recaps and trends in the Pokemon card market. And Jesse has an exclusive story to share with you all. The world's first ever graded Tag 10 Charizards. So stay tuned till the end. But before we get started, we'll be giving away a Twilight Masquerade booster box to one lucky winner. And all you have to do is subscribe to our channel and comment down below on what's your next Grail card or slab. So which card have you been dreaming about? Make sure you let us know down below. Be sure to follow our IG for giveaway updates and winner announcements.
before we dive into the auction recaps, I want to kind of first of all give a shout out to Top 10 Pokemon because I think we all watched his videos every week for the last I think 5 years, like since 2019 or 2020. Like I think I've watched him from the very beginning because I'm just very interested in auctions in general, and usually we don't really have time to look at every auction.
Sure.
And it's kind of just like a weekly thing, Saturday morning. Every Saturday morning when we wake up, we kind of just watch his video to see like what are the cool cards selling for, like trending up, trending down. Did the card that I buy make his auction recap? So it's pretty cool, but he's moved on to bigger and better things. So there's like a huge gap in the content space for this, and we kind of wanted to put our own spin to it. I know some of the other people are already doing it, but I think what we want to do is we want to not just talk about everything, talking about the significant auctions and kind of giving our insight in terms of which cards are overrated, which cards are underrated, which cards should be trending up, and which cards might be trending down. So wait and don't buy it now. So we want to kind of like do a deep dive into every auction item that we look at. So hopefully we can bring you guys a lot of value doing that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that, Jesse. So let's get into it right now. Twilight Masquerade has been a very popular set. The booster boxes are actually selling out in card shops. The top chase card is the Greninja EX SAR, and it's last sold in the PSA 10 for $680 on eBay. And this card was selling between 800 to 1,000 in the beginning of July of this month. Please do not FOMO into buying this card at this current price. You will not miss out. Plenty of PSA 10 will continue to hit the market, and the demand will surely dwindle with newer and better modern sets coming up in the pipeline.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I agree. I was talking about this with somebody else in the chat group, and I said Greninja is clearly overvalued at this point because if you look at the Japanese counterpart, it's a lot cheaper. Like I think the English cards usually are a little bit more expensive than Japanese. That's the trend, except for the 2 years in the middle of the pandemic, like 22, 23. But now it's kind of gone the other way around. But like I believe a Japanese PSA 10's in the ballpark of like 150 to 200 or something like that. Like it shouldn't be 5-6x the Japanese card. And at the same time, like the person gave me the argument that he gave was the pop is super low, super hard to pull, and it's pop 150. And as you can see, it is currently pop 150. But if you look at the gem rates, it's still 75%, I believe, when I did my calculation. I think it's 155 out of 194 or something like that. So you know it's an easy card to grade. And when you say it's super hard to pull, let me tell you, it's hard to pull, but it's not harder to pull than the Moonbreon. It's 1 out of 900, 950 packs. The Moonbreon, it's 1 out of 1,600, I think. And for a mass-produced set, that means there's going to be a lot more of these Greninjas that's going to hit the market, and people are going to grade them because of how expensive they are. So I predict the population to go from 155 to like thousands within months, and it will eventually hit 10,000. Like almost guaranteed. So when you have a top 10,000 card that's popular, I don't think it's as popular as the Moonbreon. So there is a ceiling there, and there is, I hate to use that word, but some market manipulation for these newer hits. I don't think the Greninja EX should be $300 card raw, like out
Right.
of the box within like a couple months. It just doesn't make any sense. It's never happened in the past, and it's happening quite often now. And I don't think it's 100% organic. So if you like the card, it's great. You can buy it if you don't intend to sell it anytime soon. But if you are an investor that wants to buy something for a good price, I think you can wait a little bit. It will be under $500 for a PSA 10, in the next few months, I
I
think.
agree.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's definitely overvalued for this auction, even though it is trending down. So it's better
Yeah.
than a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it is downtrending. And the next card we're going to talk about, Magikarp illustration rare from Paldea Evolved, is selling for more than some of the Sword and Shield art PSA 10s. For
Yeah,
example, the Rayquaza PSA 10.
yeah.
Last sold for this card is $570 on eBay. And as you can see, the PSA 9 population is 2.5 times more than the PSA 10. So perhaps a little bit more difficult to grade. And that's how I sort of justify that it's selling for more than some of
Hmm.
the PSA 10 alt arts in Sword and Shield. What do you think?
Yeah, so this is kind of interesting. Paldea Evolved, for the art rares, they are harder to grade because it's easier to scratch the surfaces that doesn't have texture. So there's a lot more scratches, print lines, and it's printed a little bit worse than like some of the alt arts and the SIRs. So I do think it would be more expensive than some of the other art rares because of its popularity. It's a beautiful card. But again, like I'm trying to compare it to some of the Japanese counterparts. Like both the Magikarp and the Greninja is actually like culturally significant in the Japanese culture and Asian culture. With the carp jumping over a bridge to become a dragon, like that's like some ancient like Asian folk
Yeah.
tale stuff. So I mean, it is a beautiful card, but if it's selling for, let's say, like $15 in Japan, and it's selling for like $200 raw in the US, there is something going on with it. Like it can't be that much more popular over here. And I mean, the PSA 10 prices, they do make sense compared to the raw prices because they are harder to grade. Unlike
Yeah.
most modern hits, they have over 70% gem rate. This one is like clearly lower than 40. It should be like in the 30s or 20s, right?
Yeah.
So I think compared to buying a raw card for like $300, buying a PSA 10 for like 580 is like not that bad. But if you compare to the other similar rarity stuff, like the other ARs, like most ARs go for like $1 to $5, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Right.
um
Yeah.
it's very hard for me to justify paying that much for this
Yeah.
card. Yeah.
Yeah. I would definitely not pay that much for this particular card. I would
Mhm.
rather get the Japanese version, to be honest, if I really wanted one.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree. And but like I mentioned before, I think for this particular card, buying a PSA 10 is better than buying a raw card for 300. So if you really like the card, you really want to have it in your collection, again, like you can still buy it, but we still don't recommend it as an investment because I think it's
no.
almost guaranteed to go down a little bit more than where it's currently at before it appreciates maybe in the long term in 10-15 years.
Agreed. So, speaking of alt arts, do you want to talk about this particular auction block for the Moonbreons,
Yeah,
Jesse?
so we usually talk about auction blocks in the last 2 weeks because we record this bi-weekly. So I looked at the end of June auction block for PWCC and the first week of July. So we did see this BGS gold 10 Moonbreon, Japanese Moonbreon, go for around $1,860. I do believe the PSA 10 is around 1400. There's a couple that sold for like under 1300, I believe, but it should be around that price. Pretty similar and comparable to the English one, right? So the interesting thing here I want to talk about is as I put out some of the grades, PSA 10, the difference between PSA 10, CGC Pristine 10, BGS Gold 10, and BGS Black Label 10 is I want to show you guys like how hard it is to get them. So the lower the rate of achievable is usually indicative to the average quality of the card. Because if you get 80% pristine 10s or 80% PSA 10s for a card, that means that grade is really easy to get. If you get like 20%, that means it's very hard to get. So a lot of people would say, hey, but maybe more people send it as a PSA, so it's higher. No, like the pop is higher. The absolute number is higher. But when you talk about rates, that you can kind of like take the number of cards submitted out of the equation, because even though there's a lot more submitted to PSA, the sample size for the other two companies are big enough to show a pretty good indication of how tough they grade. And in this scenario, the PSA 10 is actually 12,000. Oh, actually, it's kind of interesting because I actually used the English gem rates for this, but it's okay. It's pretty much the same. It's very comparable for the two. So bear with me here, but it's still making the same point. The PSA 10 for the English Moonbreon is around 75.5%. And I believe it's higher for Japanese. So it's a pop 12,172 as of today out of 16,130. And the CGC Pristine 10 is a pop 398. So we're talking about 3 digits here, not 5 digits out of 2,518. So that means it's 15.8%. That means only 15.8% of the cards submitted to CGC gets a Pristine 10 and above. And so I actually combined the Pristine 10 grades with the Perfect 10s, because the Perfect 10s are essentially Pristine 10s now. They're slotted in the same grade.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah, sadly. So I had the Pristine plus the Perfect 10 grades is 398, so it's 16%. A little bit under 16%. And the BGS 10 Pristine, so we're talking about the gold label. Again, the Pristine grade for BGS 10, I combined both the gold and the black label grade, so it's 25.5%. It's a lot harder than the 75.5% for PSA 10s, but it's actually quite a bit higher than the CGC Pristine 10s, which is kind of shocking because most people see the two as being similar, and some people value BGS 10s higher than CGC 10s, Pristines. And the black label, obviously, it's going to be the absolute lowest. It's at 4.2%, and still having a population of 122. I believe the Japanese version is pretty close, but 122 is still pretty high for a black label, but pretty much nothing for a card that's as popular as the Moonbreon, as we can see here. This is black label.
Beautiful.
And what I want to say is, when you look at these few cards, you can see it is a Japanese version. It's a pretty good indication of where the market is at. The BGS 10 sold for 1860 around a week before that sale, so around the same time frame. The CGC Pristine 10 sold for 1800, and the PSA 10 sold for $1,380. So around, like, I would say 30% less. There's a crazy sale of the black label that went for 12,000 Australian. So that's something like 9,000 USD, I believe. So as you can see, the black label is like 6 times the price of the PSA 10, and the PSA 10 being pretty much basically 3 out of 4 cards you sent into PSA as a Moonbreon is going to come back a PSA 10. And and I don't think the 1380 is indicative of the condition of the card, because if you're talking about CGC Pristine 10s and BGS 10s being 3 to 4 times harder to get, either the PSA 10 price is too high or the other two is too low. I don't think the black label should be 4 times the price of a CGC Pristine 10 when the rate of Pristine is 15% versus 4% compared to 75.5% for PSA. So I think at the current prices, the BGS 10s and CGC Pristine 10s are still kind of undervalued, especially the CGC Pristine 10, because now it's the highest grade possible for a grading company. And it's way lower than both the PSA 10 and the Gold Label BGS 10 in terms of the rate. So I think the the CGC Pristine 10 should be a good common middle ground between the PSA 10 and the Black Label BGS 10. So like if the PSA 10 1380 is a standard price, it should be around like 3 to 4,000 for the CGC Pristine 10. But I don't believe it should be worth that much because I don't think 1380 is even like the floor for the PSA 10. I think it should be still a little bit lower for such a modern card and so available and so easy to obtain. I'm just saying comparatively, I think the Pristine 10 from CGC grade is still undervalued, even though they are significantly more expensive than PSA 10s now. Right now, people are still looking at PSA as being that leading company and the most liquid slab out of all of it, but people don't understand how easy it is to get PSA 10s for modern cards. So you can't say that because this is a gold standard, I will always pay more for a PSA 10. It just doesn't make any sense to me because 75.5% means there's going to be a lot of off-center cards, a lot of cards with things in the back, a lot of cards with front lines that got given a 10. Because you've seen these cards, they're not like 75 76% like 10s. So I really think people need to like look at the data and kind of like put their own personal biases to the side. Like I mentioned before I looked at data 6 months ago, I didn't own any CGC slabs. Everything I owned was PSA or BGS.
Right.
But by looking at this, being analytical and someone that trusts numbers more than anything, I saw that CGC Pristine 10s are significantly undervalued. They have come up a lot in value because they used to be around the same as PSA 10 prices or less, but now they're significantly more. I still think they're undervalued at like 20%, 25% over for these modern cards because they're so much harder to get.
I agree.
That should be our first like investment tip today. For at least for a lot of these modern cards, like buy the CGC Pristine 10s because they are very, very low pop compared to PSA 10 and a lot harder to get and very, very similar in price. Some of them are like closer, pretty much PSA 10 prices. Like I've seen cards that are like 5-10% over or the same. If you can get a CGC Pristine 10 for around PSA 10 price, you should jump at the opportunity because I don't think that's going to stay for the long term. And we're not talking about the CGC Gem Min 10s because I think Gem Min 10s should be compared to BGS 9.5s, which is slotted slightly below the PSA 10s. But yeah, Pristine 10s are a really good buy right now for around PSA 10 prices or slightly over.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Rayquaza V Max Altart.
Yeah. So for this, the reason why we put them side by side is this is something that's very interesting to me. The Japanese one that just sold for 1,350, pretty much the same week or 2 days after an English Rayquaza all art sold for 575. So if you remember, we just talked about the Japanese Moonbreon and the English Moonbreons around the same price now. That has not happened for the Rayquaza all art, which is kind of interesting to me because the Rayquaza has always been like kind of like taking a back seat from the Moonbreon, and people don't really talk about it that much. But the Moonbreon has come down like significantly since Japanese cards have crashed over the last 3-4 months, and the Rayquaza is still holding strong at 1350. So that is very interesting to me. That makes the English Rayquaza seem like a pretty good buy at 575, especially because you mentioned that the Magikarp actually outsold the Rayquaza multiple times in the last couple of weeks too.
That's kind of crazy. Very interesting data points.
Yeah, so I would say not buy the Japanese Rayquaza all art and buy the English one now if you really want it. But like, there's no rush to FOMO over any of these cards because I think there's still a long ways to go before it hits its floor. Not saying they'll never go up again. Like I think in the long term they will trend up eventually, but like currently the bubble is bursting and there's probably still some ways to go before it reaches the floor.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. All right. So next up is Gengar and Mimikyu GX PSA 10 from Team Up. Team Up is seeing an upward movement again. So the booster boxes are actually selling for around 2,500, and just a couple months ago it was selling for around 1,800 to 19. And so now all of a sudden it kind of shot up. And the last sold for this particular card is almost $1,100. And you can see that it was selling for 800 to 900. And so I just think that this card is definitely a good card to hold on to if you have one in your collection. I actually have two in my collection. I graded one of my as a raw card, and I traded my PSA 10 Vivid Voltage Pikachu for the raw card, and then I submitted to PSA and it graded a 10.
Wow,
So
what a win.
so yeah, I definitely won on that trade.
Mm. Yeah, I think both Gengar and Mimikyu are two of the most popular Pokemon. I actually know a friend whose favorite Pokemon is Mimikyu, and I know plenty of people that chases every Gengar card in the world. So when you put them together, it's a really good combination. And if you look at the pop, because Sun and Moon is printed a lot less than Sword and Shield, so I actually think a lot of these Sun and Moon chase cards are good buys compared to all arts in the Sword and Shield era, because if you look at the population report, even though it's, it's not that hard to grade like every other modern card, it's got over a 50% gem rate, but it's still at pop 865, which is not that much for a popular card like that. And I don't anticipate it going that much higher. Like it might be a pop 13 1400 in 10 years. It's not never going to be a pop 10,000 or 15,000 or 20,000 like the Moonbreon will be. So in the long term, I do think this is a card that is worth holding on to, and obviously not. You shouldn't be buying it thinking it'll double in a couple of years and sell it for profit. But as a collector and someone that wants to buy at a good price, even though 1,100 is still pretty high, but I still think these Sun and Moon era chase cards are a lot better buys than Sword and Shield era all arts.
Yeah, those are good points. Yeah.
Yeah.
If Gengar is one of your favorite chase card and you can find a good deal, then I would definitely take advantage of that. But I still wouldn't spend $1,000 on this card
hmm
just
Yeah,
quite yet.
this is the type of card that I think you can find a near mint raw copy. You should buy the raw card because, as you can see from the pop report, it's still pretty easy to get a 10, as long as their
Yeah.
centering is decent and as long as there's not more than like two significant things, because PSA 10 does allow a couple of nicks in the back. They're pretty easy to grade because of the texture and just this era of card print quality being decent. So maybe buy a raw card for a few $100s and then grade it in
Yeah.
a 10, like
Yeah.
what PokeSN did. I think that's a
I
great
love
idea.
that. I love that.
Yeah,
Buy raw and grade it yourself because
yeah,
the gem rate is
yeah.
easier.
Easier, yeah.
All right. So Scream Pikachu promo last sold on eBay for $2,225. So this is another card that's fairly easy to grade and to get a 10. And so the column on the right side that I'm showing you is how much I bought these cards for. If you look at the bottom, I bought the Pikachu Scream promo for $79 about 4 years ago
It's crazy.
on Amazon.
Yeah.
So that was sort of, towards the beginning of pandemic, and I really enjoyed the artwork, so I decided to buy several copies of the Scream promo set, and I got a pretty good
Genius.
deal.
Did you
Yeah.
buy it thinking it will go up to this much, or are you
No,
just or did you just buy what you enjoyed
I
and
just bought
got
what
lucky?
I enjoyed and got lucky, and I
Yeah,
think many people will get lucky throughout their collecting journey. I'm sure you have some stories to share as
yeah,
well, buying like singles that kind of 10x or 20x several
yeah. Of
years
course.
later. But it's sort of a long term where you cannot immediately flip.
I think that's like a good lesson for people to remember is you should just buy what you enjoy. First of all, if you really enjoy the card, that means the artwork is pretty good, or there's some significance, or it triggers some kind of a feeling within you that's maybe nostalgia or something reminds you of your past, and usually that feeling is pretty universal when you see a card like this. And at the end of the day, if you enjoy it and you buy it and it doesn't go up in value, who cares? Like, you have a
Yeah.
card that you really want, right? And this is one of the good examples where like the market caught on, like everybody else realized that these cards are super cool. I mean, think about, like, this is a very significant piece of art in terms of Pokemon.
Yeah.
The collaboration with Munch, and I really think it's probably something that will never be made again, or it's something that's so unique that it's only for these cards that you can really get. Similar to the Van Gogh Pikachu, how people went crazy with that
Yeah.
collaboration, but
Crazy.
because they overprinted it so much and there's so many scalpers, it kind of destroyed the market and the perception on that card.
Very
But
unfortunate.
I would say these cards are way more beautiful than the Van Gogh Pikachu. There's a lot more character to it, and the art is just so much. You can see like Pikachu being scared and screaming. It's just so much cooler in my opinion.
And it's easier to grade because it's not hollow, right? So I
Yeah,
would imagine it's just the 81.7% at PSA 10 chance. So if you are able to get it raw, you will likely get it back in a PSA 10.
yeah. Just even looking at the listing that was being sold, you can clearly tell it's pretty off center to the left.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, like I feel like if that was a vintage WotC card, they wouldn't give it a 10.
Yeah.
For some
True.
reason, they grade a lot easier for these modern cards, like 82%.
And if you look at the trend, where the graph is in the middle,
Hmm.
you can see that it was selling for between 3 to 4,000 about a year ago today.
Yeah. Let
So
me
that
pull up the CGC Pristine rate for this card because I don't think there's a lot of Pristines. What is the total population for this card for PSA?
it's got to be around 45
300 at
4,500.
82%. Okay. Let me pull up the CGC Pristine 10 stats. And as you can see, it is 17 out of 186. It's a pop
Oh,
17 out of 186.
pop
So
17.
if you pull out your calculator, 17 divided by 186, it has a pristine rate of 9.1%.
Wow.
9.1%. So that means it is 9 times harder to get this card in a pristine 10 than it is in a PSA 10. And I'm sure, well, even the Gem Mint 10, if you add the pristine 10 and Gem Mint 10 grades, pop, you get 77 divided by 186. The Gem Mint 10 is still at 41.4%. 41.4%.
Yeah.
That means how much easier is it to get the PSA 10 compared to CGC 10s? We're talking about like the CGC Gem Mint 10 being twice as hard as a PSA 10 to obtain. So that actually brings up a pretty good point. You should go buy these Gem Mint 10s for maybe 30% off or 35, 40% off, and then cross it to PSA 10 because it's most likely going to cross for these modern cards, right?
Mhm.
As you can see. And I don't know if there's sales data for the CGC Pristine 10s, but because there's only like how many, like 17 of them, so there's probably not that many sold. But if there is one that's sold, it's probably only going to be like 20-30% over the PSA 10 price, like the trend that we've seen. So I think it would be an excellent buy. Imagine pop 17 versus pop 4,000 and something,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah. That's
9%
great.
versus 82%. This is how big the gap is. So I know like what we're saying might be pissing off a lot of PSA stands, but I mean, I love the cards. I don't really care about any of these grading companies. Honestly,
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the stats and the numbers to support like what I should and shouldn't buy at current prices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a look at another
Nope.
card.
There we go.
The Japanese limited collection
Yeah, this is a
master
Lola
battle.
friend. So this is like a pretty good indicator of where the Japanese market have went. So I've spoken extensively about why the Japanese market went crazy over the last 2 years, and that's because the mainland Chinese crowd really came in at the end of 2022, and it reached its peak in 2023. And everybody from mainland China came into the hobby and really wanted to buy up cards that would go up in value. It's basically a bunch of speculation. And because Chinese characters and Japanese characters have a lot of overlap, so they ended up buying Japanese because number one is the original, and number two, they can understand some of the characters. So um and the other factor is the Chinese market don't really have the same nostalgia as people that grew up in the US and Canada, where we have kind of a connection with the character, like the Pokemon characters, like Pikachu, Charizard, Lugia, Rayquaza. But they look at characters like people, humans, like especially pretty girls, what we call
Yeah,
waifu cards. So
waifu.
it really drove up the market for a lot of these cards. And this is a very good indicator because this card was supposed to be a Japanese exclusive when it came out. That's
Right.
why it sold for as high as 18 to 20,000 back during the hype of the summer 2023. And one of my best friends, Thomas, I love you, Thomas, but I told you when you bought this car for 13,000 that you were kind of crazy. He came to my house and he showed me this car and he's like, bro, I got it for such a good discount. I was like, how much you spend? He's like, 13,000. Dude, it was going for 20,000 a couple months ago. I was like, oh
Oh my
boy.
gosh.
Um, he really loves this car, so he's not buying to flip or speculate. So good for him.
Yeah.
But
Oof, that's rough.
unfortunately, the simplified Chinese market has printed this card as well, so it's no longer
Yeah,
a Japanese exclusive.
right. I remember that.
And again, like the whole waifu bubble has just burst. You can't just buy a card with pictures of the girls printed on it and expect it to go for 5-6 figures. So yeah,
Yeah. Well,
it's
I was
sad.
never into collecting waifus, so it never really affected me. But yeah, that is a huge loss. I feel very bad for your friend. I am so sorry
Yeah.
that happened, but you have to be careful.
Very careful. And that's why we talk about never buy into the FOMO and always kind of like go the counterintuitive route where you buy where other people aren't talking. If somebody is talking about a certain market being like crashing and oh, none of it is worth anything, I get excited. As an
Yeah.
investor, whenever I hear somebody say, oh, this market is dead, it's never going to come back up again, I'm like, dude, opportunity. And that's why we talked about Shiny Treasures EX and a lot of the Japanese sealed products. Um, I was telling people not to buy Japanese last year, and people were like, oh, you're a Japanese hater. I was like, no, I'm not. I love all cards. I just don't like it at the 2023 prices, but 2024
Right.
prices, man, there's a lot of opportunity. The same thing that happened with English in 2022, right? Logan Paul hype and the COVID hype from 2021 to 2020 to 2021, that kind of died in 2022 and 23. English was in a free fall, right? And it
Yeah.
gave us a lot of good opportunities to buy cars that we always wanted for a really good price. And now that opportunity has passed us by for a lot of these Sword and Shield cards and everything. And now people are saying, "Oh, it's I'm never going to be able to afford that ever again." Right? I feel like I'm turning into nostalgianomics. It's
Oh
kind
my
of like the same
gosh.
thing that he says
Shout
all
out
the
to Nostalgic Comic. He's great. Do you want to talk about the Lugia, the last sold? And
Yeah, I'll just talk about this real quick. Yeah, so this is actually a pretty cool card that I found. And this is the Shiny Present Campaign Lugia. The Shiny Present Campaign is like one of my favorite like campaigns in Pokemon because it actually came out with this is in the same run as the Lugia. This is my Shiny Present Campaign Suicune, also known as like probably the rarest Suicune card in the
oh
world.
wow,
And both the Lugia,
7,500.
the Suicune, the Entei, the Ho-Oh, and the Raikou, all 5 of those cards are only distributed 1,000 copies. So it's limited to 1,000 copies ever printed, which is like some of the rarest cards for these characters, Lugia and the Johto legendaries. And so
Yeah.
I've been chasing this card for a long time. There's only one sold in the history of like all the auctions, right? So it's at
Wow.
$7,500. You can
Yeah.
see it on the screen. And the Lugia sold for 4,400 as a CGC Gem in 10, where it sold for actually 9,600 a couple months ago as a PSA 10. So I kind of want to pull this graph because back in 2022, the Lugia and the Suicune came from the same owner. Actually, I know him personally, and he's from China. So Suicune outsold the Lugia by $2,000 back then, which is kind of crazy because you think Lugia is more popular. But for the Shiny Present campaigns, the Suicune has consistently outsold everything else. Maybe it's because of the artwork being so cool, how him like he's jumping out of the page, kind of It was reprinted in the English called Legends, actually. Super cool artwork. So I would anticipate the Suicune being a little bit more expensive than the Lugia nowadays as well. So probably a 5-figure card now, and I'm like pretty happy to see the other Shining Present campaigns cards sold, even though this one's a CGC Gem 10 kind of underperformed at 4,400, but still a really cool card. Like many people don't know about these, and this is the type of cards that I think instead of buying the modern promos that have 4, 5, 6,000 population, like some of these cards, like this is a pop 48 in a PSA 10. So is a Lugia. Lugia is pop 48 as well. Pop 46. So like these cards are some of the rarest cards for these iconic characters, and they are so low in population that I think they're kind of overlooked. But you couldn't really get one even if you tried for a long time. So pretty cool
Wow.
auction.
Very,
Yeah.
very cool card to have. And you're
Yeah.
like a Suicune collector, so that's like a must-have
Yeah,
in your
exactly.
collection.
It's a must have. I've been
Yeah.
trying to get this for a long time and I finally got it last year. Super happy.
Congratulations on that
Yeah.
big pickup. So we also have a special reveal from Jesse. Jesse has been on a remarkable journey and has acquired 2 of the most coveted grills in the Pokemon collecting community. How did you manage to get your hands on these incredible cards? Can you take us to the beginning of on how it all happened?
Yeah, so we actually already talked about how I obtained this first edition Charizard. Um, I bought it as a CGC 10. We kind of have a whole story segment on it, and this is the cleanest copy I was able to find. I was ready to pay 190,000 for a PSA 10, but I could find a copy that's clean enough. But everything that I saw on the market was basically modern day PSA 8s because they're older PSA 10s. So I just couldn't pull the trigger on one of them. I ended up finding the CGC 10 that was a lot better in condition than all the PSA 10s that I've seen. And I ended up buying it for like a lot cheaper. So it worked out for me. And the shadowless Charizard, I've been chasing like a 10 condition shadowless Charizard for a long time as well. Because I think the shadowless Charizard is super cool and it's almost underrated because the population is actually a lot lower than the first edition Charizard. And yeah, I was able to find this really beautiful BGS 9.5 shadowless Charizard that's like stronger than most of the ultra PSA 10s I could find for 60,000 as well. And I ended up, I thought it had a shot of crossing to a PSA 10 or CGC Pristine 10 or Gem Min 10. So I wanted to send it to CGC first, and actually got a Gem Min 10, which is a pretty good upgrade. And before I sent it to PSA, I was like, I wanted to see if I can get it in tag because I learned about tag as a new technology based grading company, and I just thought it was a really good experiment to try and see if these 2 cards are true 10s. So this is actually very nerve wracking because I spent like 2 months deciding whether or not I want to do this. And then I actually saw Jason's Pokecard Zone's illustrator in a tag 10. I was like, so beautiful. And I was like, I'm just going to take the leap of faith and do it because it's not as easy as people think. It's like, oh, yeah, you can just cross it and it doesn't get a 10, you just get it back. It doesn't work like that for tag because there is no crossover option for tag because the system, the machine grading system, it can't grade through a slab. So in order to grade it, I have to crack it open. And I was like, oh, I'm just so scared to do it. But then I saw Jason's illustrator, tag 10 illustrator 955, and Dubsy and multiple people that held the Logan Paul or owned the Logan Paul PSA 10 illustrator said that was the cleanest illustrator in the world. So I was like, screw it, I have to do it. And then I decided to take the leap of faith, and I actually submitted 3 other cards along with my 2 Charizards to tag to crack and regrade, and the 2 Suicunes and the CGC 10 Umbreon from Neo Discover. As you can see, the Suicunes unfortunately did not make it. They both got 9s, so that was super unfortunate. I really wanted to have those as tag 10s as well, but the good news is both of their Charizards actually came back a 10, and the Shadowless came back a 959, and the first edition came back at 960. So those are pretty solid grades for vintage cards because I don't think I've ever seen a vintage card for higher than 970. Most of them have a lot of scratches and print lines, and a lot of whitening as well. And these two cards are two of the strongest examples of the first edition and shadowless cards I've ever seen. So I'm super, super happy to get it back. I wasn't able to get it back for like a month after it was graded because I didn't
Yeah.
want to ship it. I was so scared. I actually lost a big package recently.
Yeah.
It's like a $12,000 package. 12,000
Right.
Canadian is like 9,000 USD package. So like I'm
Wow.
like super paranoid on shipping stuff. So I
I
had to wait
believe.
for someone to come back from LA to bring these cards back to me, which is why I pretty much waited a month before I had it. I was in Japan and everything. So I'm super, super excited to have these two in my collection. These are the only two tag 10 um, first edition Charizard and shadowless Charizard. So I'm excited
Yeah.
to hold them and share them with the world. And they just look so clean and clear. And oh, I
Wow.
think there's a lot of like I put a lot of my fingerprints on the case, but it's super nice. And you can see how nice it is in the Slap Mags tag protectors. So Slap Mags actually makes protectors for tags. So the gold and black goes very well with the crystal clear tag slabs. And yeah, I'm very, very happy to have it. And I was getting a little bit emotional looking at it yesterday because I was like, these are two
Oh.
cards that I really wanted as a kid, right? Like it
Right.
really doesn't get better than this. Like you're looking at two of um the 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 strongest like PSA tag 10 um first edition and shadowless Charizard. It's everything I wanted as a kid. I'm so blessed to be able to hold them in my hands, and I'm kind of like living the dream of that 7-year-old kid, walking around the streets of Palo Alto. I actually posted it on Reddit, and somebody got mad at me and said, "Yeah, you make Palo Alto sound like a hood." I was like, "Nah, no, it's far from the hood." But
What?
it's I no longer live there, and you always like reminisce and miss where you were at when you were younger as a kid, and those are simpler times. So this is what I'm talking about. Like it brings me back to my childhood. It's really like a time capsule, and having these two cards in my collection, I'm super happy. And I'm most likely never going to sell the first edition Charizard, so that's going to be in my collection most likely forever. And
Yeah.
yeah, and the shadowless we'll see, but still having them two together is just like a sight, and I wasn't expecting how beautiful they would look. I'm sure you've seen it on Instagram.
Yeah. Well, I
So
remember
I'm
3 to 4
impressed.
years ago around Pokemon Saves the World. I just remember during that period of time when we met, you really wanted a first edition Charizard, and I think you
Yeah,
were looking to buy a PSA 10
yeah,
first edition Charizard, and now you have a Tag 10,
yeah,
world's first Tag 10 first edition
yeah.
Charizard. That is amazing.
It
You've come a
really is.
long way.
Yeah,
It's
and I'm glad I didn't buy it back then because I've had plenty of opportunities to buy them for like around 300,000, which is kind of like what they were going for. And I mean, my investor instincts told me to wait a little bit, and it has come down to a reasonable price, but still compared to some of the CGC 10s are now my tag 10. I think most of the PSA 10s being sold being ulcered and kind of crappy in condition, they're still overpriced. So just be patient. Like I really tell all my friends, like you have to be patient. Like you can't just, I know how it feels to really want something and just buy it tomorrow. Like sometimes you FOMO and just buy the first card you see tomorrow, and you oftentimes regret it after. So really take your time. Like it took me years to find. I've bought like so many first edition Charizards, none of them in a 10 condition. I bought raw cards from collections. I bought like really strong nines, try to crossgrade them, and didn't work. But like they were worth it because I was paying like a fraction of the PSA 10 prices. It's buying like
yeah.
PSA 9s for like 15,000, right? Like it's
Yeah, yeah.
a no brainer. So be
Yeah.
patient, and eventually all your collection goals will be a reality if you're patient and smart with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's how you reach your goal is by being patient.
exactly.
A
Yeah.
quick question though, did you crack the cards yourself or did someone from Tag crack it for you?
Yeah, so I cracked most of the cards I submitted to tag,
Uh-huh.
but for these cards, I asked for someone that's there that's like a professional to do it.
Okay.
Um,
So you didn't have
so
to do it yourself.
yeah, I was like, you know what, don't really want to like do it myself, but at the same time, like I also wanted to I wanted someone that's just better than me to do it. So I just sent it, and they're like, "You sure?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm sure. I'll crack all of them." And all of them got cracked. Unfortunately, 3 of them didn't cross, which just kind of shows you, like, obviously some people are saying tag 10s are easier or harder or whatever. Like, it really the other companies are very inconsistent. So they told I was kind of like surprised that the Suicunes didn't cross, and then they showed me there's like a dent that was kind of missed.
Oh
So they
wow.
got nines. But I'm glad the 2 big ones got 10. So that's all that
That's
matters
all,
really.
yeah,
So
that's all that matters.
yeah.
And I mean, the dig report is pretty comprehensive, and I looked at
Hmm.
it
Yeah.
in detail too, and it shows you where all the
Yeah.
defects are, which is pretty
Yeah.
amazing. So that's
It is unfortunate how they show like everything though, because 90% of the stuff that they marked, I can't see with my human eye, and they're saying it's there, you just can't see it. So it's unfortunate because I'm like, oh man, I have to look at this, but it's also a good thing because that means anybody that's buying this card will be able to know every single defect on the card. All right, there's
yeah,
if you change like the transparency, like you can see there's some print lines in the back, but I can guarantee you, even under a magnifying glass, you're not going to be able to spot the print lines in the back. There's like 5 print lines in the back, apparently. If you go down and look at the back,
yeah. I mean, I cannot see any
yeah,
print
you can
lines.
see on the back, there's like a bunch of print lines that shows with the defect transparency, but with a human eye or even with a magnifying glass, you really can't see it. So
Yeah,
I'm like, dude, that's so crazy. You guys are so strict, but at the end of the day, it's like what we want, right? We want every defect
exactly.
to be shown on the system, and which is why like what happened with some of the recent stuff where people are saying tag missed the dent on the Zapdos. It's a company that doesn't have perfect technology yet, but I know they're on their way. And one of it is they adjusted sensitivity to because a lot of people like myself are saying you're picking up stuff that I can't physically see. They're like, it's there. I was like, yeah, it's there, but if I can't see it, like like you shouldn't mark off points, right?
Yeah.
So it's just part of the process. They're growing, and again, like I'm just a big supporter of them, and I'm gonna say on this podcast as well, I don't own any tag shares as of today. um I am thinking about investing in them, but I'm supporting them regardless of being an investor or not. I just think I just love things that are using technology to solve a problem that we have, and the inconsistencies of human grading is a major pain point that needs to be solved, and I think this is a company that's on the right track to solve these pain points. That's why I wanted to support them and grade a lot of my personal grails with them. Who knows what the future holds, but as of today, I'm very, very happy with my tag 10 Charizards. And yeah, I'll be looking at them every day for the next, I don't know, 5 weeks.
Wow. I
Yeah.
would love to see them in person one day. It must be like give you like this amazing feeling of sense of accomplishment to
Yeah,
get those
I
back in
just
your hands.
yeah, it's really like it's kind of surreal. I've obviously been blessed enough to have everything I want, like materialistically. I have a nice house, like cars and everything, but I don't think anything gives me more satisfaction than these beautiful cars because they are what I dreamed about having when I was a kid. And I think there's nothing more important to like current day me than to like see that 7-year-old kid have his dreams fulfilled. I never dreamt about having a big house or like a super fast car. I just always wanted the Charizard. So
Yeah.
it's so cool.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that your dreams have been fulfilled. Do you
Yeah.
have any other chase cards that you've been chasing after as a kid?
Yeah. Well, like I've mentioned to some people, like people are like, your collection is so like heavily weighted towards like English vintage grails and things like that. Like, why don't you buy some Japanese cards? Like, I was in the market for illustrators. Obviously, you know what happened with Illustrator with the market being flooded, so I kind of stayed away from that. But everything
Smart.
else, like the trophies and some of the promos, like I never really had any, like I don't have any nostalgic feeling looking at it, so like I don't
Yeah.
really buy cards that I didn't want as a kid, but they're growing on me. So I would say like my next goal that I really, really want for big cards, well, there's many little cards I want to buy. Like for
Right.
all my Suicunes, I want to upgrade them to pristine 10s and above, and maybe tag pristine 10s. That would be crazy,
Yeah.
but I think it'll be almost impossible to get tag pristine 10s. But maybe the first tournament trophies, like the first, second, third place. Maybe that is like a goal that I want to achieve. Oh, other than my obviously my CGC Pristine 10 Gold Star set. So that will take a long time. Plenty of pop zeros. That's like a long-term goal, maybe a short-term goal in the next like few years. If I can get
Yeah.
a good deal and for the first or second tournament trophies, 97, 98, I probably want to get that set. I've seen so many people post theirs. Well, not so many people. I've seen Dubsy post his and a few other
Yeah.
people in auctions, and I was trying to bid on one, but I ended up not winning. I think I was second or highest. So maybe that is something I'll buy because I think the tournament
Yeah.
trophies, the early ones, are a lot more significant than Illustrator and some of the other expensive promos. So maybe that's the next big thing I'm gonna buy.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. Congratulations again.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm super happy.
And with that, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and make sure to enter into our giveaway and follow us on Instagram for more details.